There's a certain allure to film photography that's attracted me for some time, but it always seemed like too much hassle, too time consuming and too, well, expensive. As someone intrigued by it but has not actually shot film, I wanted to see if the time, the expense and the hassle is actually worth it.
Oi mate, yeah? Is that a film camera? Yeah, it is actually. That's original.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. A lot of what I've been doing recently in my creative life has put slowing down at the forefront. And I've kind of looked at film photography as a way to be able to do that to a kind of new level. I'm also really drawn to images shot on analog cameras. There's a certain look to them that is very pleasing. And being able to select different film stocks depending on the look you're after is something that I really dig. I can't ever imagine fully switching to film like some others have done, and I'll go into the reasons why a bit later. But from time to time, I think I could get a lot from it. This film journey for me started about 2 months ago when I walked out of a local charity shop with this, the Praktica TL1000, which cost me £30. I knew nothing of this camera or any other film cameras apart from Mamiya 7s and Leica M3s and Contax T2s that everyone else on YouTube seems to shoot on. But I was delighted with my bargain purchase. This is a fully manual SLR film camera with a built-in exposure meter that may or may not work. It's got a 50mm lens, a maximum aperture of 1.8 and is heavier than the burden of having to make YouTube videos. It went straight in my camera bag, and because I wasn't taking enough to the US of A, I also picked up this Olympus XA2 point and shoot. This cost me £40 off eBay, and it's a camera that I'm pretty sure my gran used to own. Not this exact camera, but the same model. This one has got a fixed lens of 35mm, and other than needing to select the focus of near, far, or wherever you are, you just point and shoot, which I think is where they got the name. The next thing I needed was film, and holy shit, that stuff's expensive. I've seen people rave about the colours of Kodak Portra, so I opted for a roll of Portra 160, a roll of Kodak Gold, which is suited to sort of sunnier conditions, and a roll of Ilford HP5, which, as far as I'm aware, is a black and white film stock. In total, these cost nearly as much as the cameras I'd bought, which I was previously so happy with the price of. I then packed up my bags, argued with airport security about X-ray machines, and went on my road trip to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons, which hopefully you've already seen, but if not, I'll link it at the end of this video. So both of these film cameras contain existing film. This is film that was in them when I purchased them. I've got no idea what film is in either of these, the Praktica or the Olympus. I don't know how old it is. I don't know if it's colour, if it's black and white. I don't know what speed setting it is. I've just got to rely on the fact that the cameras are set to the right speed settings. So I have really got no idea how any of these photos are going to turn out, whether or not the film has been exposed to light. So it feels like quite a big risk being somewhere like this in the Grand Teton National Park to actually use these, but I've got to use the film up. So over the last day or so, I've been shooting with these as much as possible and just kind of testing them out. I say testing them out, it's going to be pretty difficult because I'm not going to get the results from them back until after I'm home, and by then I'll have burnt through at least some of the other film that I've brought with me. So it'll be interesting to see what I actually get from these cameras. This had 20 odd shots taken on it when I got it, and this had 6. I'm keen to know what's on these films. It could be anything. It could be people's family memories, but it could also be something that might land me in jail. The plan was to use the colour films, primarily the Portra, on colourful scenes with pastel colours, as I believe that's its happy place. The gold was going to be a general sunny conditions film, and the black and white was for shooting on clear days if those conditions presented themselves. You'll notice that I'm not showing any photos here, and that's for good reason. This camera kept going after 36 exposures. Now you can sometimes apparently get 2 to 3 more shots out of a roll of film, but I was up to about 6, which was slightly concerning. I didn't know if I was double, triple, quadruple exposed in the last frame.
So in my tent last night in the dark, I decided to open it up, which was a challenge in itself because I didn't know how to open it up. I thought it was this little button in the bottom, but this button does, well, it must do something, but seemingly it did nothing. What I learned though is that as you take images and wind the film on, this should turn round, and this little crank handle here was not turning round, nor did it have any tension, so I couldn't roll the film back. So I had no real option other than to open the camera up. So I opened the camera up and that's right, there is no film in this camera. So all of the shots I've taken so far in it do not exist. The only thing I can think of that must have happened is whoever had this camera before me, for whatever reason, had taken 20, 22 non-shots and wound it on that many times, hence why the counter was on that. So it's kind of expected that I could assume that many shots have been taken, but also I probably should have just opened this in a dark space beforehand and checked to see if there was a film in it. So that's the mystery of what was on this camera. Absolutely jack shit.
I will talk about and show the shots towards the end of the film after they've been scanned and developed, because that's what happens with film. You have to wait.
I'm trying to use up this film so that I can put a different film in it, because I'd quite like to shoot on black and white today, because we're here in Yellowstone and it's clearly not ideal conditions for photography. So I think shooting in black and white will probably work a bit more, and I definitely want to keep using these film cameras, so that's what I'm going to do. I think this is it must be a 36 exposure film because I'm on 28 exposures. I'm just thinking back to what happened with the other camera and how there wasn't any film in it, and I've all of a sudden become slightly concerned that there might not be any film in this camera because I've not checked it. The crank handle, there's no tension. I don't think there's a film in this either. They say you should learn from your mistakes. It's taken me a day, but yeah. Should I open it? I'm going to open it. I don't know how to open it. Yeah, there's no film in it. Good. So unfortunately, that journey of wondering what on earth was left on these two film cameras has come to a premature end because there was no film in either of them. On the one hand, at least I know I'm not going to jail for trying to get some sort of weird images processed at a lab, but on the other, I'm kind of disappointed that some shots I think I've taken over the last few days I don't actually have anymore, whether they be on old film or not. I did take everything on my digital cameras as well, but that's kind of not what I intended to do. So it's a bit of a shame, but at least I know now and I can kind of carry on in the best way possible. So today, in this one, I'm going to load this, the Ilford HP5, which is a black and white film stock, which, as I said, will be perfect for shooting on today.
So following that total disaster of photography, we continued on our road trip and I shot here, there and everywhere without further issue. Well, that I was aware of. One thing that was incredibly obvious was that I was shooting a lot more selectively than I would have done if I had a digital camera in my hand. I'll do the maths later, but when you know that each shot is costing almost £1 per image, you naturally think about things a bit more. You take your time and you only push that shutter button when you are really, really ready. In a world where we now demand everything instantaneously, I really enjoyed this process of slowing down. Not rushing through it felt really novel, and I got so much from it even though I had no clue how the images were going to turn out. We got to Denver on the last day and wandered the colourful streets of the Five Points neighbourhood to try and finish these rolls off. I actually only got through the portrait and the HP5. This was quite a change from the landscapes of the last few days, but I embraced the challenge and was soon rewarded for my efforts. Having got the film through airport security again, US airports are much better at dealing with this than UK airports, where I had to put the film through the scanner. They told me anything rated ISO 800 and below would be okay. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, you're not supposed to put camera film through X-ray scanners because it can damage the film inside. I then sent them off to a lab to be developed and scanned. I used Analog Wonderland in the UK, which are not affiliated with this video, but provided an excellent service. It took a couple of weeks to come through, but then the moment of truth. Getting an email wasn't quite as exciting as when I used to pick up envelopes of film that I shot as a kid from the Kodak shop, but it was still really interesting to get these back. In the interest of your time and mine, I won't show all of the images here, but I have put a blog on my website with every single shot I took, and I've done this using my website, which is hosted through this week's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is a new sponsor of this channel, but I have been using their platform to host my website for a number of years. You may have seen last week that I launched my first digital zine, and this wouldn't have been possible without Squarespace. I was genuinely surprised how easy it was to start selling on my site, and this took so much stress out of my life. Setting up your own website is now easier than ever by using their Blueprint AI design system, which means your website can look exactly as you wish. In the unlikely event that you run into any issues, which I'm yet to do, they've got award-winning customer support that's on hand 24/7. So if you want to show your work in the best possible way, start an online store or set up a blog, then head to squarespace.com/Rick Bebbington, where you can get 14 days free and 10% off, and there's a link in the description. As I've said, I've shown every single frame I shot in the blog because I think it's important to show all of them. After all, the fuck-ups cost exactly the same price as the decent shots, and we all make mistakes. It seemed the shutter button on the Olympus was just a little bit too sensitive for my liking. Honestly, I'm not only shocked and amazed that these all came out as they did, but I'm also delighted with them. There's a few where the focus is slightly off, some that could have been composed a lot better, and some that I probably just shouldn't have taken. But for a first attempt with film, I am so happy with them. Before I got these back, I was more excited or more looking forward to the portrait shots, but they don't look quite as I expected. I'm not really sure why, and I probably need to study this film stock more to get the best out of it. These colour shots have been tweaked slightly to my preference, but not a lot. The HP5 shots are a real delight to me though. There's clearly a lot of character in this film stock, and I'm really happy with my application of it. I think my lack of trust in my own ability to get something out of these cameras has slightly taken the shine off it though. As I said earlier, every shot I took on these film cameras, I also took on my digital cameras. So I've already seen the images just in a different form. Now I know that they're okay though, next time I can quite happily go out and shoot with just my film camera and know that I'm doing the right things. What I have been looking at is the difference between the digital shots and the film shots of the same subjects. Trying to look at these objectively, it's the subject and the composition that takes the limelight. And that is always down to the photographer, not the tools that they use. The film stock undoubtedly brings some character, as I mentioned, but is this enough to keep using them? I think so. I need to work with these cameras a little more, test out more film stocks, and spend more than 2 rolls of film with them to really concentrate my thoughts. But there is something here that is a little different to digital that makes me want to persist. Yes, film is expensive, but so is modern digital camera equipment. I think by the end of it, I'd worked out that each shot from the Portra cost me 89p, and from the HP5 cost about 65p. And then I printed them at home, so you'd have to add that cost on as well. There's obviously different prices for different film stocks, different prices depending on what film stock you're developing and in what quality you want them scanned in. If you're going to do this for work, you can factor it into your pricing. But if it's for a hobby, well, maybe it's okay to spend a bit of money on the things that you get enjoyment from. As I said earlier, I've enjoyed it, but I can't ever see myself fully switching to film photography. It's great, but no matter how you look at it, digital is a lot more practical. So is film worth it? Yeah, I think it is. I've really enjoyed doing this, and I plan on doing a lot more of it over the next year or so. Compared to digital, it's a really low entry point in terms of price, especially if you hunt around for cheap cameras, and if you're willing to put the time in, they are out there. I really enjoyed this entire process, and having photography feel a bit more intentional felt really fulfilling. I know you can slow down and do this with digital, but I think just psychologically knowing you can press the shutter however many times to make sure you get the shot in amongst a bank of say 20 shots just kind of takes something away from it. It's shots like this, just a single frame fired at exactly the right time, that give you a feeling of accomplishment that I'm not sure I've ever quite had from digital.